If you could pick any era to live in, what would it be?
What era would I live in? As long as I could, remove disease and things like that, awful things that would have made those time periods actually not very pleasant to live in. The thing that made me fall in love with history was probably the Victorian era, and it probably was like a child's romanticised idea of what the Victorian era was like, the fashion and things like that. So it's possibly a little bit romanticised, but maybe that era. So I've been here since 2019. I've worked in museums and heritage sector for like 10 years before that. I've worked in education for the Railway Preservation Society of Ireland. I've done visitor experience, I've been a librarian, lots of different things. And I've also done a bit of volunteering with HMS Caroline, Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. So my role is I'm a Curator of Modern History for the Ulster Museum collection. So for us, modern history is the period 1500 to the present day. So obviously it covers quite a lot in that period of what took place here. So we obviously have a lot of big events: First World War, Second World War, 1798 United Irishman Rebellion, Plantation of Ulster. But we also deal with kind of what people's lives were like in the everyday. It's basically telling the story, the kind of human story of this place is what we do. And for me, a curator, our core role is to care for the collection and be a custodian for the collection. With difficulty, yeah. It's a challenge of our role for sure. I think it is quite a good thing because we can look at the broad scope of the history and, understanding what takes place here in 1968 can be informed by the years of history prior to that. So it's quite a good thing in some ways, but it also can be a challenge. And my experience before coming to this role was primarily more modern history. So I'm still gaining my knowledge on the earlier period, but that's a really fun part of my job. I get to research that and expand my own knowledge. I see the importance and the significance of Troubles and Beyond as an exhibition a lot. Basically every time I do engagement in that gallery, we would do tours with people, most often local community groups, support our education department with the work that they do on workshops for students. And you see it in the reactions people have to it. We have had a previous Troubles gallery in the Ulster Museum, which was first opened in 2009, and we did get some criticism for that one. And I think you can see the difference in the feedback we get now and the reactions people have to it, that it is actually prompting those difficult conversations and that kind of critical approach that I know has an important impact. And you can sort of see the reality of us taking that active role in addressing the impact and the legacy of the conflict. So you really see it when you talk to people in the gallery. One of my favourite things in modern history, it was a donation a couple of years ago. It's a little mug that just says HMP Holloway on it. And basically it was a lady called Margaret Kennedy Robinson. She was from Banbridge and she was involved in the North of Ireland Women's Suffrage Society. And they would have handled out flyers and attended meetings at the Ulster Hall. And they were contacted about being part of a suffragette demonstration in London, and she volunteered to be one of the delegates. So she went and they threw stones at the windows of a department store in London, Swan and Edgar's. And there's a brilliant oral history interview with her where she describes that she was really proud of herself because she broke the window on her first shot. I think she's in her 90s during the interview, and she's so funny and really engaging. But that mug, basically she then ended up going to prison for 2 months for her involvement. She brought that mug out with her. Apparently she left the prison arm in arm with 2 of her friends, and she had it tied around her waist to disguise it. So I love that item. I think it tells a really rich story, and it has a lot of humour in it as well. And it also, it's really hard to get suffragette items. That material is not very commonly found. And so for us to have something that's connected with that movement here, specifically, and the story of an Ulster suffragette, it's really cool. the one in Troubles that I always speak about with groups is the visitor book from the Ulster American Folk Park. It's interesting to me because it comes from one of our sister museums within National Museums NI's remit, and it's an ordinary item that a group of Spanish school kids signed their names whenever they went to visit the folk park, and then later that day, it was on the 15th of August 1998, later that day they went into Omagh Town Centre to just do a bit of shopping, I think. And one of them was killed in the Omagh bomb later that afternoon, and his name's written in that book. And I always point it out on tours. I think it's a really impactful object. It's something that was so everyday that was kind of transformed by this moment of conflict. And Omagh's one of the things I remember as a child happening. So it kind of has a connection for me as well as as a visitor, that I remember that taking place and kind of what it meant for the Troubles and everything that had taken place here. So, yeah. I think the last few decades, or maybe even longer, there has been a lot of conversation in our sector about what it means to be a curator and even what it means to be a museum, the idea that we have kind of a role to play in society and we're not just this, it's ironic because we're surrounded by books, but like a stuffy kind of hallowed hall where no one can do anything, and there's a lack of engagement is perceived in that earlier period maybe. But I think really what we're here to do is to look after the collection, and that means not only preserving it for people to see it and learn from it for generations to come, but also to increase access to it, because it's no good just sitting in a store and never being seen. So that can be through exhibitions, it can be through tours or any kind of workshops that we do with people. It can be through digital content, bringing in researchers to our stores to publish about our collection. There's loads of different ways we do it, but the core of my job, whether it's research or access or public-facing things that I do, it comes back to caring for the objects. That's kind of the main thing we do. The thing I would say about our job is that the curators look after, this is the national collection, and we look after it, but the national collection belongs to the people. So we're just there to take care of it for everyone to appreciate and learn from. My research interests are pretty varied and they're developing as I get to know the collection more, and it's always dictated by what we have in the collection. I've always been interested in women's history, and I think in particular I'm really interested, we talk about the Troubles and Beyond exhibition, that one of the aspects of and beyond is that like economic and social history behind what was happening in the conflict. You know, the Troubles did not take place in a vacuum, so there's a lot more beyond it, and I find that really interesting, like actually being able to show to people what everyday life was like, and those sort of objects relating to that is really interesting. So anything that I can do relating to that is pretty good. The main thing I look for, I will admit it's hard to turn off sometimes, so I find myself going around looking at labels and looking at how people have written interpretation. And all of my friends tell me to stop because I'm just doing my job as I go around. I like anything relating to my research interests, so women's history, also military history. I find it really interesting how different institutions will present that and talk about it. And if there's anything talking about our history as well, I'm really interested to hear how that's shared in different places. And also the thing that I increasingly look for whenever I'm trying to look at tips of how other people have done things is the stuff that we're trying to implement in our galleries. So making sure that accessibility is at the forefront, how are people doing things sustainably and things like that, and increasing diversity and representation in the galleries. So I'll always look out for those, but I'm just a big history fan at heart. So anything to do with what life was like for people, I'm there.